Cool. So I wanted to catch up with you to go over the state of the RBAC stuff that we're working on and to try and work with you to see what you need in terms of either issues created or visuals or assets in order to start looking or breaking down the interface that we're looking at. So one of the things, unfortunately, right now is that we don't have any permissions or any roles in the front end. So we don't have a way to really interact with it, which gives us time for us to start coming up with the front end look. I assume you've already gone through the prototype, or you've seen it before at to some capacity.
Yes, I've seen the mocks that you have, the designs that you have created.
Cool.
So maybe we can go through this little by little and see.
Yeah. So the first thing would be where the location of the page will be. And I think we just want to have a navigational element in the settings. Right now, we don't have the enterprise user section, but so we'll need a location for it in the self-managed, or to have it be in a place where it won't it won't make too much disconnect when we try and transition the SaaS environment over to the self-managed top-level organizations group. So I'm curious if you had like a proposal or something to think about regarding that. Actually can't share this.
What I like is that the navigation menu is close to the user. Somehow the two of them are, at least in my mind, connected logically. Roles and permission are used by users. So having this close together, at least navigationally, makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well, as finding a location for it within the user management, I think makes the most sense for now. Here's the screen I wanted to share. So if I go to an example like my group, where's my group? Here. Just within the setting, or excuse me, the group information and membership is here. I don't know if adding roles and permissions here in this section makes sense, although the membership is right there. But I think it's okay to leave it there for now, on the idea that we're going to move it in the future. Is that sort of what you're saying, is having it somewhere either in or near this section?
I guess in the administration makes more sense. Can I ask you who will be able to create new
only top level group owners or admin? So the problem is, it makes sense in the self-managed environment where we have an admin screen, so it looks like this in this admin area, where we have this section next to roles and users and roles and permissions. The problem is when we go to the environment of, like, where to go here, the self-managed, where I don't necessarily have that admin, or excuse me, the SaaS environment where I don't have the admin screen and I just have my group, where would that exist? And that's what I was saying, is that I think for now,
I will not add a menu here, because that could be imply that the group owner can create roles that, well, maybe that's the case, that are unique for the group. Is that the case, or when you create a role, will be served by the whole instance?
So it would only be the top level group owner.
Yeah, but imagine you as the group owner, you create a new rule, will that group will be available to only this group, or it will be available to other groups as well?
So you mean if they create a custom role?
So imagine I have group A and group B. I am the owner of group A. I create a role in group A. Would that role be available for group B?
You mean in a subgroup or a lateral group?
In a lateral group.
So in our current implementation, no, but that's where the idea of the organization's group will come into play, where we have that top level, and that's where it would impact the role creation would always be at the top, so that you wouldn't have that lateral interaction. The problem is right now, as an example, so we're using this groups. There's no interface for that interaction here, where I would assign at a top level all of my groups. These are all examples of the top level group, because we don't have this admin field until we get that enterprise settings field. And that's where I think this problem might exist. I think one of the situation we have to probably wait till that gets implemented. That's kind of where I'm looking at, is that maybe you have some sort of other proposal, or there's some other way we can do it, because right now the only way to do it is assuming this top level container, which isn't manifest in the current UI, we'll just pretend it's this, would have settings that would say enterprise user settings somewhere here, but which doesn't exist for the time being.
That's interesting. So go back to the group. What if instead of, so click on the group information. All right, so here we have 3. Okay, good. We could add a for menu here, activity labels and members, and then one more, right? Permissions that it will emulate. But if you go to the yes. So here you have 3 tabs. Yeah.
Right.
What if we added at this level permissions?
As a line item?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, is that having it somewhere at the very top makes sense. And then as we transition to enterprise settings, which would be a new section at the top, we could nest it into that. So I think that kind of makes sense, where it would just be some other additional item here that would be that roles and permissions setting that we're looking at here, but it's its own section here in one of the main top level navigational elements.
Okay, what about the horizontal tab? No, it doesn't belong to anything here.
It's possible, but the problem is these are projects. And so, you know, if I make a project, it's going to just show up as line items. And so the idea of the logic of it being projects and permissions seems a little too disconnected, because it's not necessarily tied to projects. It's tied to the user. Let's see here now, this. So yeah, I just have projects or subgroups, and then having another item as permissions feels like it's problematic.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to explore that possibility. Okay, good.
So I think a navigational element up at the top is not necessarily problematic. From there, we have the section with the permissions containers. So we have the custom role or the standard role, which is just this GitLab 5 permissions that we have. There's also this, which I don't have a strong, I'm not in love with it right now, because the problem is we need some sort of capability to audit something. So let's see here. Oops. Opened a new window, which it's not supposed to. This one. Let's see.
Daniel, is this page for information only right now, the standard roles, or would that in the future be something that an admin or a group owner could disable, for example, as a specific, or remove? Do we want to even remove guest as a possibility? Is there any kind of interaction that we are seeing in the future?
So that's where the audit comes in. So the idea is that as an example of audit, I would be able to, well, let me go to to the page where it looks like it actually has content. 1 second. This one, maybe it's faster. This one should work better. So on the assumption that now I've created a custom role and it's labeled here as incident manager, the screen previously was empty. But that's where this audit behavior comes in once it finishes loading, where I can then go through and I'll select this line item and what's going on here? So I'll select this, and then that changes the contents of this table below to show which permissions are assigned to this custom role. And you can use that. So say, for example, you have 10 line items here, where you could then look and see what the difference between these different permissions are. That was the original intent for this, to where this content, that's what this content would be used for. But I'm not sure that's the best use for it. The reason I thought we could use that as an audit process was because if the idea was I were to start over, let's see. And I go through the process again, that's where the second section comes in, where we're going to create the user. Is it working yet? No. Restart. It's loading. Very not responsive system. So the table would just show all the interactions, and you would then select, what custom permission you needed. But this is super long term. And in the interim, right now, we only have the one MVC of this one permission in the backend on the API only. What I want to do is build out some sort of framework or foundation for this that other teams would then populate with their specific feature permissions. So you're not going to go and create all of these, because that's just too laborious, right? Why would I have to go and do all the permissions work for every different feature? We're not the authority on that particular feature and the use case and user stories, etc. So I want to build some sort of framework or documentation on the process and how we add or integrate these permissions into the UI or the front end. And that's where this kind of container auditor screen comes into play, is that's part of the framework of building the custom role. So then you can go back and see that now I can go and click around and see that custom setting that was created and how it compares to other custom permissions or custom roles. But that's where this sort of interactive table comes from. And I thought using it redundantly in this capacity, where we actually go back and can go audit or click around and change the view would be useful in that when you're making that custom role. And it replicates here whenever you're building that custom role.
What I see here, just a couple of comments, is that interactivity wise, this page, the create new role, makes sense to create it in view, because for example here, although it's not super interactive, the only thing that it really has to change is, for example, if you change the role on the top from guest to something else. So at that point, what we want is to the standard role to occupy the left side of the middle section, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Middle column. Yeah.
The middle column. The rest is quite static, but this could be implemented in view.
Yeah, because the idea is if I select one of these custom or one of these default roles, it changes the table data
exactly
to developer here in this case.
Yes.
And then same thing here where I enter a name and then it populates the name. That's the main interaction points. And then the customization is these little checkboxes.
Yes, which is not, I mean, that's not interactive. That's a checkbox, right?
Right.
If you go back to the previous thing, yeah. So what I see here is that these two screens are actually not interactive, and that could be implemented in XAML, except for the search, top search, which is a little bit of interaction that in this search, probably what we want is to type a role, a permission, a type of permission, and then
I would say at this point, since we have only, the one MVC in the back end, the ability for a search is very low. We don't have there's no custom roles to be made that are, we don't have the assumption that an organization is making 10 different custom roles, 100 different custom roles within the next few milestones or quarters, right? That's a much farther problem to look at. But the idea of having the search at some point in the future would be more so for the custom roles. If your organization creates a bunch of custom roles, if an admin were to query, oh, team A has a custom permissions, I want to search for team A or whatever metadata I had assigned as part of that creation process. And that the search, I think, would only be just for the permission name. But I think at some point, if we have a more robust search query in the future, could they query locations of those custom permissions where they were assigned, what groups or a particular user member? I don't know if it makes sense for the user member here versus the user member screen here in users, but that's where I think the idea of having search bar would make sense if there was, hundreds of custom roles. Obviously, it's not useful to scroll around looking for them manually. But like I said, this is a much farther process, much further down the road.
Okay.
Let's see.
I have an additional question.
Sure.
How does it work? If you create a custom role, and you create a user with that custom role, user A, for example, and then you modify the custom role and you add another permission that didn't originally have, does user A will get that additional role, or is this kind of a template and is on the time of the creation of the of the user that this template is applied. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so my understanding is that if you were to create a custom role, go back in the future and edit that custom role,
all
with
the
a
users,
user, go ahead.
Yeah, all the users will have the updated permission.
That would be the logic that I would assume would be inherited. It follows our standard inheritance for other things. Also in the same idea, if you're a member in a group and the group has a permission assigned to it, and an admin were to change the permission for that group, then all the members in that group inherited that change. So arguably that behavior should stay the same.
Okay.
It's up for the admin to make sure that they're not doing anything they're not supposed to by accident, right? And that's where we have the audit in the future to try and help minimize that, or, you know, find where that occurred.
Okay. Yes, I think it makes sense. But I wanted to double check that.
Sure.
It wasn't the other case that act like a template that is only on creation. That will be a nightmare, really, because if you create a user with one template, one custom role template, and then you modify over a long time, then you will have maybe hundreds of users with different actually permissions, because you have been changing the template and the time of creating this user. So it will be really, really difficult. So hopefully that's not the case. But I wanted to double check.
So that's where the idea of the role to use as a template, this will only ever be the standard GitLab 5 templates, because we only ever want to create from a known good condition, right? You don't want to allow somebody to continue iterating on some weird custom permission that they've made, which could be problematic in the future.
Yes. Returning to the previous page, what I think would be useful is to have in these standard roles, not this type of representation, but something that is represented similarly to the documentation, where you can see the guest, reporter, developer, maintainer, or owner side by side, and you can see all the roles and what it does what. Because if I will be an admin and I am new, for example, administrating GitLab, right? Well, I will have to go to I will have to go by one by one to say, okay, what is the difference between reporter and guest? These two sounds very similar, and it's quite laborious that I will have to go to, okay, namespace, what are the differences? Guest, reporter, maybe developer, but so it will be a really nightmare too. So I think this, I will argue that is so something similar to the table in the documentation. And it acts a little bit like the reference. Okay, so here are the standard roles. I see graphically everything fine. Then I go to the custom roles, and based on what I have seen in the GitLab standard roles, I will modify this or that.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to look at that. I have another round of validation that I'm going to use with end users. I'm going to ask some of these questions like that. How would you want to interact or view that process? So to try and help improve this screen. Let's see. The other thing we were looking at was in regards to permissions are only additive. We can't undo or subtract a permission. Presumably that shouldn't be a problem in the presenting the information on in the table.
So, for example, you are showing here developers, and sorry, and you can only subtract. No, you can.
You can only add. So in this case, the developer has this permission to view and namespace and project traffic stats. I can't undo that.
Okay.
We don't have the facility in our system just yet to subtract or disable that. So I can only give an additional permission that wasn't there to begin with. So in this case, a developer couldn't view the billing, but if I make this custom role, now I can give them the permission to do to view billing. Or I can undo it so that it's still the same as the developer role.
Yes.
Only going up in permissions and not down.
And yeah. So for example, here in the developer, I will have to show all the roles of the developer plus all other roles that it can be 1 or 2 or 3 levels up and up to the maintainer or
Right.
up to the what is the
Owner.
owner, right? So for example, view billing, for example, imagine that is a maintainer, I will show that. But in the next one, if this is viewing site is the owner, I will show that because it's all the levels up.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Or do you want to show only one level up? That means you can give a developer some of the maintainer roles, but not all of the owner.
No, you could theoretically go all the way up.
Okay, so you want all the
levels.
levels.
Right. At some point in time, the whole table will show be the same table as that appears in the docs. However, it will what is selected will be based off of what you have here. So in the future, I could create a reporter role and then also which would have nothing enabled, but I want that admin role or owner role of viewing billing, and I could turn that on.
Okay. So if I want to, for example, create a super specific type of role that is I'm gonna give to my finance person in the company, just something very the view billing, for example, right? I could go to the most basic role guest, and then give something that, for example, is that one.
Exactly. So there's no restriction on what can be given from the bottom up. It's just that we don't have a way to do anything subtracting down.
Yes.
So in the example you say, that'd be the perfect use case. I have an organization, I have a billing team. I just want them to look and pay the bill for GitLab or whatever. And then I'll give them guest and then give them the view billing checkbox, and that's it.
Are we even plan to have something that it has even less permission than guest? Because, for example, a person in finances, it may be difficult but that's a different conversation, doesn't matter.
I mean, I would hope in the future when we can do subtractive permissions that would be possible, but we're currently limited to the additive, so starting from guest only.
Okay.
And also as a way of maintaining, again, like a known good state, like the good state being that they can access the platform and do the basic stuff as a guest user. If you have anything minus that, I don't know what would happen. What if they wouldn't even be able to get in or some, view certain pages or anything. That problem has not been investigated.
Daniel, I think that in this interface is where maybe I will add the search the first. Because if I am an admin and I want, and I know where the type of permission, I would like to navigate very quickly to to that permission and then enable or disable.
Yeah, that I think also would be pretty simple because it would just be a raw text query. You're not searching anything in the database because all you want to do is say, I'm looking for billing. I'll just search for billing. I was like, okay, it's right here under this one.
Exactly.
So I think that makes sense because it's not doing anything complicated, just doing a raw text query within the tables.
Mm-hmm.
I think that works. Adding it here, I can create a visual for that. Let's see. Yeah, but I think also that's another one of those long-term things because at this point we don't have anything that anyone can add really except for that one. So that was it. I don't know if you had any other questions.
Can I think one sec?
Yeah.
So right now we have the ability to add a permission to a guest, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. The idea being is that the custom permission would be all these 5, so I could add it from a guest. And right now, I think with the MVC is the guest, and it is viewing what was it? Pipelines, something with pipelines.
Okay. Okay. So, for example, to apply that, what we have here, the template, for example, will have only guest. Maybe the others could be disabled, right?
Yeah.
And right, report the developer maintainer. Let's disable it so they are present, but you can actually. And then pipelines. You said that is where in these menus would that be?
Let's see. In this example, I didn't populate the whole table with all the permissions. It's just, only 4 of them in each one. But I'm assuming it would probably be in CI/CD. Yeah, here it is, view pipeline page. Yeah.
Okay. So in order to create graphically the same thing that we are doing with the API, we will have at least to create this table, CI/CD table, right? And the upper drop down. Okay. All right.
I need to actually drop for my next meeting for the quad planning. So if you want, we can do this async or we can do a follow-up.
I think we can do async. I think I have answered the majority of the question and I have a better understanding of what I will need. So yeah, it has been very helpful. This is very exciting, Daniel.
Cool. Awesome. Great. We'll follow up async then.
Okay. Wonderful. Take care.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.